Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. Welcome back to VALORANT news with loads of VALORANT results all around the world over the last 24 hours. The key story though is Icebox gone from the competitive map pool in the near future. When the new patch update comes in, Bind will be back in, Icebox will be gone. Lots of reaction to this from many pro teams, some very much enjoying it, and others such as Fnatic might not be so happy despite their dominance of this season so far. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. Plenty to discuss. Firstly, wanted to mention some of the matches in the European side. So Na'Vi played BBL, they got the job done 2-0, but pretty funny that cNed apparently picked the wrong agent on Fracture. They still made it work because cNed turned up for some reason on game 2 with the Yoru, definitely not particularly overused, even though I remember when Yoru was buffed a while ago that TenZ was really confident that Yoru was going to be viable on a competitive perspective. Hasn't really been the case to be honest so far, but yeah, very interesting composition here from Na'Vi on Fracture with the Cypher, the Omen. Obviously BBL went for an entirely different approach. Okay, Fade was the common denominator, but definitely a weird setup that Na'Vi went for here, especially with cNed on the Yoru, but they got the job done anyway. Game 1 was slightly more traditional here on a sense, 13-10, so not an absolute demolition job, but on the whole Na'Vi just too good. The other big series though was dapr and the Fnatic guys against Heretics. Their series, or their first series with Alpha back in the team after his visa issues have been resolved, and he wins and he says, what do you guys get in your night markets? And you know, Heretics free, like Team Heretics stuff. So I thought it was pretty funny. The other thing though from Fnatic was Mini saying, the head coach, every time like how I feel when we pick Icebox into teams who picked Icebox last series, because you know, teams that are good at Icebox, they think they're good at Icebox, and then they play Fnatic on Icebox, and then they think, oh well, you know, maybe we're not actually as good as we thought we were, because Fnatic are unreal at that map, and certain players have been unreal at the map over the last couple of seasons as well. OpTic were pretty good at it for a time last year as well, but Fnatic have been great at Icebox for a long time. But Icebox is going to disappear from the map pool, and we'll see the evidence of that in a second. This was the overall results of the series. Pretty straightforward again for Fnatic. Okay, Alpha's first series back, he wasn't exactly on top, but again, dapr, Icebox 13-3. I mean, these guys are so good at this map, it's actually outrageous. And then Ascent was 13-6. Another just Fnatic smoke show. These guys are clearly the best team in the world, and it's going to take a lot to stop them. But getting rid of Icebox might well be a key step in that direction. So just to look at what the season's looking like so far, it's still early days in the respective regions, because all of these teams play the other 9 teams. So you know, Fnatic have played 3 games so far. Most teams are getting towards have played 3 matches, and by the end of the split they'll have played 9 matches. And you know, there's a question as to whether when Icebox gets changed, what the plan is going to be for when it actually gets added into the map pool, and we'll discuss that too in a second. So Fnatic are obviously on top, 3-0. Then for esports, Na'Vi have got to 2-1, so they're looking good. Vitality, Liquid, Koi, etc, etc. And then it's you know, BBL at the bottom, Giant at the bottom. There's still a long time for these teams to turn this around, but so far, of course, you know, you want to be in the top 4 to qualify for Masters, and early on it's looking like Fnatic are walking away with this group as expected, or really with the entire region. So if you guys remember, about a week or so ago now, we discussed the bind changes coming in, the new teleporter locations here towards the A site, the increase in the width, I suppose, of some of the doorways that allows the attackers to get into the site slightly more easily. They've also adjusted the box on this map, so it's now going to look like this, and there's been various screenshots and everything coming out of this map over the last few days to show what it's going to look like. Same story on B. There's also this new interesting vent here on B as well, which allows more of a retake, so it's more attacker sided on A site, it's more defender sided on B site. That's what it seems, and I think these are generally good changes, quite significant changes, but still keeps the general feel of how Bind used to perform. Now, at the time when Bind was, the rework was coming through, everyone said, what map is going to leave for Bind to come in and replace it? And we thought, well, the most likely candidate is probably Icebox. The other option was maybe Ascent. I know that people said, oh, maybe an Ascent rework is coming, because most other maps they've removed and reworked over the past couple of years. Split is now back in. Of course, you know, Pearl and Lotus relatively new. So is Fracture, really. So that leaves you with Haven, which to me is, you know, Haven's pretty perfect, I think. I don't really think that needs many changes, if any at all. Ascent, I know there's been some complaints about Ascent, but I still think it's a great map, and especially for ranked and stuff, Ascent has always been phenomenal, I think. So then it leaves you with Icebox, a map that isn't really particularly well liked. You guys might disagree, but in the pro scene and certainly in the casual community, Icebox hasn't been a fan favorite. They reworked it before. It maybe improved slightly, but it still isn't great. Now, the weird thing about this is that for the VCT VCT Americas, there's a sponsor tied to the map. We discussed this at the time, right, that Heineken are sponsoring Icebox. So whenever it appears in the VCT Americas, there's going to be like, Heineken logos plus, I don't exactly know what the plan is, but I believe they even made some sort of bar in Brazil, I think, which is like Icebox themes. So you'd have thought that for this to be the case, and we discussed this at the time, that that Riot would have decided with Heineken, hey, okay, this is a pretty cool idea. You're sponsoring a specific map whenever it appears, and whenever obviously it works quite well, Icebox and cool beer, all this type of stuff. So I can understand why they want to do it, but fundamentally, if Icebox has gone for the map pool like immediately during the stage, then Heineken might not be so happy about it, right? So the assumption was that probably there's going to be no change here for the time being, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is the case. Bind comes back on April the 25th or so, but the Americas and the other stages around the world don't end until pretty much the end of May after all the weeks of matches go down. So will they change the map rotation mid-split, or will they not? Because the issue is, if you don't change the map pool in the middle of the split, which I think they might well be forced to do, then you can't really change it for Masters, because every team was playing on Icebox and no Bind coming back in for all that time. Then they go to Masters, and then, you've got to really play on the same map rotation and map pool you've played on the matches for the previous weeks that you play at Masters, and then after that, there's no split 2, and this is the thing. If this season there was split 1, split 2, then okay, fine. Split 1 for all the matches we're going to have on this, LAN environment, and then the Masters, play that with Icebox, and then split 2, play it with Binds. But there's no split 2. So when Bind comes back into the pool, or when it comes back into the actual game itself from a competitive perspective, what are they going to do with Icebox? And given this association with Heineken they have, can they really just remove it in the middle of the split, or have they signed a deal to say, well, we're tied in for the near future? So very weird in a way that Icebox is going to be gone and will leave the competitive queue at the start of Act 3, which is coming up soon. But will that mean it translates over to the professional scene? You'd imagine it probably does, but I don't know what that means for the Heineken relationship and all that. So it's an interesting question to answer. But the assumption does seem to be from the pros that indeed when Bind returns to the game on April the 25th or whatever, shortly after that it will be converted into the rotation for the professional circuit, and Icebox will be gone, whatever implications that has. Now Durka has loved this map, of course, and the Wolverine meme here, and as Durka says, so like winter snow that melts away, so does Icebox bid farewell today. Like a nice little poem that he's come up with here, or that he's got ChatGPT to make for him, which is more than likely what's happened. But I'm not going to take anything away from Durka's poetry abilities. Now this is Fnatic's map pool. Now look, Fnatic, this is like all time, right? And they're very good at many different maps. Bind, in fairness, they have a 77% win rate on. So Icebox going and Bind coming in is probably not too bad for them. But I did just want to look through this quickly just to show their win rate. This is like their entire history. So things have changed around, but they've been pretty good for the majority of their time. Split, they've never been that good at. Ascent, 60%. Icebox, though, 78%. And in recent times, like, this has been their best map hands down. They're good at obviously all the maps, of course, but Icebox with that win rate, especially in recent memory. And if I filter it for just this year, which I just did, they're undefeated on it this year, of course. So, their round win percentage, 60-odd% on attack, 67% on defense. They're very good at this map. So, yeah, we'll see, right, when this comes in, who does this help, who does this hurt? Rooney here from Cloud9 is very happy that Icebox is gone, and while Fnatic might not be so happy, there have been a lot of optimism, especially in the Americas, who generally don't like this map too much. Rooney seems to be happy that it's gone. Vanity agrees, now of course on Shopify Rebellion. Icebox is gone, he says. And also this from Zekin, map has zero strategy in ranked, thank God that it's gone. So, obviously in the pro play, there is more strategy involved, and clearly Fnatic had a bit of a skill gap on that map because they would smoke most teams they played on it. But Zekin also, and there was an agreement here from dapr even in the replies, that, Danny says, first of all, what do you mean in ranked matches too? Do we tell them, Danny? So G2 dapr seems to agree with Danny, also from G2, that the skill gap and the level of strategy on Icebox wasn't there compared to the other maps, and I would be inclined to agree with that in part as well. I've never been a massive fan of it. So lots of these teams seem relatively satisfied. Fnatic less so, but Cloud9, Sentinels, Shopify Rebellion seem kind of on board with the idea that Icebox is going to go. When exactly it goes, because with all the changes they make, right, with Lotus coming in recently, and also, with Pearl a while ago, but also Gecko coming into play, there was the overlap between what the Challengers players were using. They didn't have Gecko in, whereas the pro teams had it in, and therefore, how do you practice? What do you practice on? It becomes a bit of a mess, really, with some of the timings here. here, especially because everything is dragging on so long this season with relatively few games per week that will they adjust it mid-split? I guess they'll kind of have to. One quick thing to mention here from the Game Changers team that V1 have, they've qualified officially for the main event. So that's been a storyline that's been ongoing for the last couple of days. And also just this from Roy quickly, I think touching on the point that I just mentioned. He says open qualifiers are better than the challenger system. Convince me otherwise. Says that they display upcoming talent more often, they have better entertainment, more underdog stories, more opportunities for unpaid teams, and a reason for TOs to host events more than once a month, which I think is a fair point. I think the issue is with the challenger system, in my opinion, is that there's no promotion relegation mid-season. I'm surprised that there was one set of open qualifiers at the start of the year and nothing for the rest of the season. I think the best system would have been have the open qualifiers as it was, have the automatic invitees as they had as well to challenges, and then after what we have now, after the mid-season invitational, then do a switch up, right? Have a relegation promotion tournament, have another open qualifier set go through where the worst teams in challenges get replaced by the better teams in the open qualifiers, or at least do, as I say, like a promotion relegation tourney where the best open qualifier teams then get to play against the worst challenger teams to see if they will usurp them and take their spot in the challenger scene. That would make way more sense. It would also give way more for the players that fail to qualify to play for, because right now the only chance you have as a challengers player if you didn't win the open qualifier and make it through is just to hope that a team in challengers picks you up, which is a challenge when there's not too much tournament organizer support. So interesting observation. I definitely think some changes to be made for next year's ecosystem. I'd very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.